Hello, mighty warriors, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alicia, if you don't know already. And today I'm going to talk about what I learned this weekend from prophetic words, from a sermon, a rhema word that I felt like was tailored just for me. And I want to pass it on to you so that you can be blessed by it, learn by it, and maybe weave that into your walk with the Lord, so that you can get through the trials and tribulations in your life. So I'm going to start with a prophetic word that I received from Joshua Giles. So, excuse me. Um, Usually, sometimes, I'll talk to the Lord and I'll ask Him, if there's something that you want me to know or hear, or if there's something that you have for me, please block out all the noise on my feed, my the prophetics that are not for me, and just send me what you want me to hear, right? And so on this particular day, a prophetic word video popped up from someone I had never seen before, but the title caught my attention, and so I clicked on it, and it was this gentleman, Joshua Giles, and his prophetic word about how December is a gateway month. And so, since we are in December and we are approaching a new year, I clicked on it, and what he said was very profound, and I felt like very timely for me. He talked about how December, being that month where we are closing out an old year and we're entering into a new season, is a time where we are especially vulnerable. It is a time where the enemy is going to try really hard to prevent you from entering into your destiny, from entering into your new season. And when you're listening to prophetic words, it is important that you get some kind of scriptural reference. And he did give us a scriptural reference. The story that he referenced was when Jacob had been wrestling with God in the desert, and then God struck his hip and changed his name to Israel. But in that story, Jacob travels on, and he is leaving the place of meeting with God and going to this place of provision. He's in transition, and his name has been changed. And right before he enters into, like, right before he gets to this new place of provision, his pregnant wife, Rachel, is thrust into labor, immediate, strong labor. And so she travails in labor right when they're near this house of provision, this new house of provision. And as soon as, the baby is being pushed out, her life is being taken. And there is this exchange, this old life is taken away, and this new life is brought into the world. And also, at the same time, you know, when he's just a little ways, he's just a little ways from this place of provision, he has to bury his wife, right? And this is a probably really emotional, devastating time for Jacob, right? But in the story, it says that Jacob buried his wife, and then Israel got up and went on. So as he's transitioning into this new season, he, as a person, his old life had to die, and then this new person emerges, and he travels on, right? And but also, you also have to look at how, at this particular time, the enemy is trying to, you know he's trying to test you, and he's trying to bring upon strong emotions, and he's trying to cause you to recoil so that you don't move on, right? He's going to try to do whatever he can to keep you from moving on into your destiny, right? And so this is what this was. This was an attempt by the enemy to keep him from moving on into his destiny. But he buries his wife as Jacob, and he gets up and he moves on as Israel. and he doesn't let that stop him. With December being a gateway month, as Joshua said, we have to, as Christians who are currently in this wilderness season where the Lord is providing for us, and he's leading us where he wants to go, and he's testing us, and he's tempting us, and he's causing us to hunger in the desert so he can deliver provision, so that we will know that he is faithful. When we are just a little ways from where we need to be, this is where the enemy will try to cause the most damage, where he will really try to intervene with you getting to the promised land. So here comes the next thing the next sermon that kind of basically was a second witness to what I received from Joshua. So today, or actually yesterday, at online, I did an online church service at OCBF, and they had a guest pastor, right? I don't even remember his name, but he was really good. But this is what he preached on. He talked about how when Israel had left Egypt and they had been delivered into the desert, delivered from their enemies, and the Lord was providing for them, that there were these scragglers, these rabbles, these kind of they were kind of chasing the coattails of Israel, these people who had left with Israel, who were not Israelites, how they started complaining. They started, poisoning the minds of Israel to complain about the food, right? So the Lord is providing this daily miracle in the desert of manna, right? But these rabble rousers, these people in the, on the outskirts of the nation who don't really belong to the nation are complaining. They start fantasizing and getting Israel to fantasize and think about, the fish that we had back in Egypt, and the cucumbers and the onions and this and that and the other, right? And it was a very test. They were testing the Lord, okay? And as you know in the story, that the Lord God becomes enraged, and he sends him so much quail it makes him sick. But what you have to remember is that the enemy was involved in this, right? The enemy was poisoning their minds. He didn't want them to think about the miracle, the fact that God was being faithful, the fact that God had just delivered them from slavery, from bondage, from death, from this horrific situation, right? That generations of their family had endured. He got them to start thinking about the food, right? Even though they had food, it's not like they were starving, right? He was providing. It was a daily miracle that he was providing. But also in the scope of this situation, Israel was not far from the promised land, right? God took them into the desert to test them, right? And they kept failing the test, right? There was also a situation where the Lord was about to let them enter, and they sent the spies, right? And the spies came back and poisoned their minds. The enemy will try to poison your mind. He will try to stop you from entering into the promise. Usually when you are the closest, when you are just about to get there, right? That is when those strong emotions start coming out of nowhere. That's when those evil people start testing you or pushing your buttons or being that thorn. You have to be careful right when you're about to enter the promised land. That is when the enemy shows up. That's when he finds an opportunity to keep you out of your destiny, right? And the Lord was really showing me that. And I a couple of times this Christmas season, I was going places and traveling around with my kids, and I could recognize for the first time that these emotions coming up in me were meant to try to test me, to keep me from my destiny when I'm just so close to getting there. So close. Okay? So I'm just going to read this little synopsis that I wrote from the sermon. It says the Israelites complained about the manna, but the manna was a daily miracle and reminder of God's faithfulness and where he was taking them, and that he would provide for their every need, no matter how it tasted, because the rebels complained about how it was tasting, right? It should have been seen as a daily miracle that God was providing for them in the middle of the desert and delivered them from their enemies. It tasted like a wafer that was had honey in it, is what the Bible says. And the manna should have also been a reminder of where God was taking them, to the land of milk and honey. So they were kind of being fed like these breadcrumbs that tasted like honey that were taking them to where they needed to be. It should have been something that encouraged them, right? But the enemy got them to stop remembering right and got them to start remembering wrong. Instead of focusing on the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God, he got these people fantasizing about the food, but they forgot about the cost of that food. Sure, they had food for no cost, but it cost them their lives, their labor, the generations of their family, their freedom. Sometimes the frustration that God gives us with something, so in this case, they were frustrated with the sameness of the food. Sometimes it's a reminder of what God has brought us out of. Because if we don't have anything to remind us, people tend to forget. So imagine if, actually, here's an example. When the children of Israel got into the promised land, things were good. They had good food. They had everything, and they started to forget. They started to walk away from the law and not obey, right? But when God gives us enough frustration, right? It's not a big amount of frustration, right? But it's sort of a reminder that, yeah, I have this frustration, but it's nothing like what the Lord delivered me from, right? I have this little issue that I have to worry about, but it's nothing like the slavery and the bondage and the torture of where I came from. So I hope that this message blesses you. Remember, when you are closest to the promised land, when you are closest to the house of provision, when you are closest to seizing and taking the land that the Lord has promised you, this is where the enemy will try to swoop in and get you to remember wrong. Remember when those spies came back and told them how fearful that they should be. Israel forgot how he delivered them from Pharaoh, right? They forgot how he fed them in the desert. They forgot all the things, how he parted the Red Sea. Them going into the promised land, that should have been no big deal. It should have been nothing, because they knew all the things that he had brought them through, and that he had pushed out of their way, and where they had come from, right? So when you are so close to seizing the promised land, to reaching the house of provision, don't let the enemy get you to remember wrong, right? Don't start fantasizing about the fringe benefits and forgetting about the pain and the turmoil, right? So I hope that this message blesses you, okay? We are in a gateway month. This is December. We're about to enter into the promised land. We don't know what the Lord is going to do or what he has for us, but it's amazing, and we know it. So we just have to stay the course. And when the enemy tries to get us to remember wrong, we need to just remember all the things that he's done to get us here. The provision that he's provided, how he's blessed our children, how he's blessed our lives, how he's kept the boat afloat, even when, by all human eyes and human perspective, it should not be floating. But God kept the boat afloat, right? So until next time, signing off. Be baptized, be blessed, and don't give in, okay? Stay the course.